It's time to talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast. So I've been grooving to a new album that came out last month, and it's by Chromeo, one of my favourite sort of 2000... I suppose they came out at the tail end of the 2000s, but I sort of look at them as like a 2010 sort of dance act, because that's when they really got notoriety with some of their singles. They've got a brand new album called Adult Contemporary, and it's fantastic, isn't it, Peter?
It's just got all the goodness you want to hear from, like, because they're occupying so many sort of places. They're occupying a soul thing, like a funk thing, a dance thing,
A disco thing.
a pop thing. Like, they're just sort of doing everything when it comes to sort of a more groove and funk orientated sort of pop. You know, because it can all merge together with some of these genres, you know, depending on how you do it, because they're, you know, the songs are there, you know, all the songs are like big pop songs, if you know what I mean. And that's not like a criticism, because pop, when you say something's pop, it just means it's well written, you know.
Yeah.
Regardless to what your actual stance is on pop music, pop is really just this has been written well.
Yeah, it's like concise almost is one of those things. And the thing that really is cool about Chromeo, for anybody who is like a self-proclaimed synth nerd or anything like that,
there we go.
They just have so much cool like kit on all the songs. If you're into that sort of thing, otherwise you'll just listen to it and be like, this is groovy. But like, you can listen and you can just pick out all these vintage synths and drum machines, which is so cool.
Because it's really interesting, because there's some bands like Chromeo that just have all the hardware to back it up and use all the hardware. But then on the flip side, there's people like Sunglasses Kid, which, you know, if you're on Instagram or TikTok, Sunglasses Kid, he's a fantastic musician in his own right, doing sort of a similar thing to Chromeo, but it's more in the synthwave wheelhouse. But my point is that he uses predominantly soft synths, and people are always convinced that, you know, he's using hardware. I mean, he even had like Matt Bellamy from Muse on his Instagram live stream, and he was saying like, what hardware are you using? And Sunglasses Kid was like, I'm not using hardware. And that just goes to show that, you know, there is a case to be made that the hardware isn't essential, just before we go into it. But goddamn, is the hardware cool if you can use it?
Yeah, I think because Chromeo have talked in lots of magazines and lots of like interviews about how they've built up this sort of like synthesizer collection over time. Because with the way Chromeo make music, it is largely down to just getting a nice drum machine and a nice synth and just starting an idea like that way. And they've gone through this. They've got really cool sort of things on Mix with the Masters. They've gone through it on like Steinberg's YouTube channel. They did a bit on recording with Cubase, because they're now using Cubase as their main DAW. And it's just really cool. But also with Chromeo, they have a really positive mindset and spirit in like everything they do, and that's the thing that comes across in the songs, is that you can almost hear them smiling whilst they're delivering the lines.
Yeah, and a lot of the songs are very funny. Like Lost and Found like has a very funny sort of overall lyric in the verses, a sort of lyric that you don't hear as often now as you used to. I feel like, you know, there was a time maybe in the 70s and 80s where a lot of the word, and definitely beforehand, like in the 60s, where lyrics were just, you know, it was something to fill the gap. But, you know, I suppose people have gotten a lot more into talking about, you know, emotion and, you know, very deep issues, and trying to tell specific stories in songs that sometimes you think, well, isn't music supposed to be fun as well? And, you know, this is an album of songs that are fun. And that's not to say that there isn't any, you know, like deeper meaning in any of the lyrics, but the lyrics are just on the surface, just fun, and you can just dive straight in.
Yeah, and that's always like when you see Chromeo perform, if you see just even like the profile pictures of them, the album covers, everything, you like on Head Over Heels, where they both got tights and high heels on, and there's lots of like trickery with, is it their legs, is it not? Well, that's up to your interpretation. It's just all very like self-referential and like pointing the finger at themselves and having a lot of fun with it. Like that's what I think is really cool with Chromeo. But the other thing is that they just groove, and they've got really cool bass lines, really cool sound design, and really fun songs. And I've been really looking forward to this album because I got into Chromeo basically after their last album come out, Head Over Heels. I wasn't following them prior to that. I sort of discovered all of that in one go. So this is like the first new Chromeo release for me in that sense, as like a sort of semi-new fan. And there's really, really cool songs. Like one of my highlights is Friends and Lovers, which actually has Madian on backing vocals, which I think is really cool as like a Madian fan also. And the other thing that's really cool with Chromeo is that they've announced a tour in the US with The Midnight, which is a big surprise, I think, to a lot of people who listen to either or both
It's
bands.
like a lot of your favourite stuff sort of colliding, really, with Chromeo at the moment. Like say, as somebody who's a fan of The Midnight and Madian and Chromeo, just to see that they're all like, yeah, and we're friends with The Midnight and Madian's on this and stuff, you're like, yeah, that's what I want to see from artists. I want to see, collaboration, but in ways that is really interesting, and I saw that they were saying that Tim from The Midnight is working on a lot of new remixes as well, and I think, well, if they're going on tour and they're supposed to be like big friends, maybe fingers crossed we're going to get a Midnight remix of one of these new Chromeo songs, because that is a crossover. Like there's one thing for them to do a live crossover, but I would love to hear a studio crossover of Chromeo and The Midnight.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting because they've got the tempo of a lot of the Chromeo songs are just rife for like very good remixes, and also I do think like what Tim does with previous remixes for The Midnight, I think he could just take a track like Lost and Found and just make it like, if he was, I mean, I probably won't do it like the earlier Midnight stuff, but if they're remixing, maybe they'll go back to that house synthwave thing.
I think they are doing more electronic orientated stuff on this newest album because they've sort of, I think when you do something like Heroes, you have to say, right, we've taken this 80s rock thing as far as we can go, because that's not what their sort of bag is, even though it is. Their thing is synthwave. So, I think they're going to pivot back to the electronic music, and I think maybe them touring with Chromeo is like a hint at maybe what they're doing with the sound, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because when you think about how Chromeo approach live concerts, it's more akin to what The Midnight did the first time we saw them. It was like it's, I don't want to say backing tracks, but there's an element of it that is being performed live, and there's an element of it that is either being triggered live or that is on some kind of time grid.
Somewhere between a performance and a DJ set, really.
Yeah.
I think, like you say, saying backing tracks seems counterintuitive. It feels more like some sort of prepared DJ set, or just like you say, even like a triggered, because some people are really good with stuff like launch pads and just triggering songs to DJ like in a completely different manner than actually DJing with turntables. So either way, though, the Chromeo live show is something. I mean, we're going to go see them, aren't we? So that's going to be fantastic. I mean, that's all you need to know about Chromeo live, is that they do a really good show.
Yeah, they've got these chromed out like Eurorack modulars behind them as well when they go out live, and all the instruments, as the name suggests, they're all chromed out. They've got some very cool guitars, basses, and I think they've chromed. I want to say it's an SH101 that they've chromed out, but it could be numerous different synths. But yeah, the vintage synths in places come with them on tour, and you can really see that when you see like pictures of them. Like we watched bits of them playing Coachella and stuff like that, but I'm very excited to actually see them in person.
Yeah, you see, I don't know again if they're one of those acts, like it's very common to have this now, where they'll have like a festival set where maybe they've got a condensed lineup of it's just the two main guys in Chromeo, and then when they go on tour, because they did that live album where they had like a full band, didn't they?
They
recently?
did, yeah.
So it might be you go see them on tour, and maybe they've got a full band, or maybe it's one of those where it depends on the venue, it depends on the size, and depending on what it is they're trying to do, they will either have a band or not have a band. You know, Ed Sheeran's somebody who comes to mind where it's like he will do whatever's needed. He can go out with just himself and a loop pedal, or he'll go out with a full band on TV and stuff. So it's one of those.
Yeah, it's very cool. Like the other thing with Chromeo, I think that really strikes me is that they have a very big live guitar and bass presence. So they even fill that sort of, I don't want to say rock, but it has the guitar music element that's really nice with solos and sax solos and everything.
It seems like Hall & Oates is one of the better comparisons because, like I said, that there's instrumentation there, but it is based on the groove and the sort of party element to it.
Yeah, and I feel like Chromeo are in a niche. Like, I'm sure there will be acts that are in a similar vein to Chromeo, but what Chromeo have for me is like the complete package. They have incredible songs and albums. They have really well sort of recorded, but also like really interesting in the sound design department. They're not like boring songs to listen to. Like the synths are very interesting, but they're not sort of synths that you feel like you've heard all the time. They're not like really predictable sounding. And the other thing with Chromeo that I think is a really big selling point for a lot of people is the music videos. Like Chromeo have consistently made like either funny or clever or like unexpected videos where they're always messing with your expectation. They're always doing gags and like the trio of videos. I think there is going to be a trio, but I think they've only released 2, Personal Effects and Lost and Found so far. What's the other one? I Don't Need a Girl. The first track on the album, where they're in the car. That's the third video.
Yes, yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
And all 3 of the videos off the new album are great in really different ways, and there's sort of like Personal Effects always makes me laugh because there's 3 private investigators and they're all following each other, but they get cheaper as it goes along, which is one of the funniest gags like in a video because you have to be like thinking about it as well with a lot of the songs. It's not like in your face funny. It's like it's the subtleties of the way they play with your expectations.
They're not spelling it out. It's like if you're really watching it and you're sort of paying attention to what is actually happening, then you sort of see these things where you go, no, actually that's really funny. But it's like how many people are gonna sort of look at that and actually think about why you're seeing these images in the song. Because you know what, a lot of music videos, a lot of people are just sort of watching it and they're listening to the song as well. So it's just like you're not thinking about a narrative in a lot of music videos, I feel like.
Yeah, a lot of videos have become just different stages with different flashing lights or different like sets with like strobes and stuff, and it's just about the person performing, whereas there's something really nice about narrative videos that are trying to tell a story in the background of the song. And like even Lost and Found, it's so simple, you know.
Yeah,
they're just lost. They can't find each other on the street, and it's the way they film it and play with the sort of the camera trickery of them zooming down the street, and Dave Wan's stood in 3 different places on the same zoom, and you think, God, it seems like such a cheap video initially when you think all they have to do is run around with the camera in like a busy part of LA on like the beach sort of, you know, like our promenade bit. But then you see that sort of stuff and you go, how would you even go about stitching that together? Like, as you know, like if you was the cameraman or the editor or whatever, you go, that's where the cleverness comes in. But yeah, it's a great album, and you know, I'm such a big fan of Chromeo, and I just feel like they do such a good job, and I'm happy that they're actually making more music as well, because I think with a lot of artists at the moment, and Chromeo is, I think they're very lucky to still be on a major label, because it just feels like a lot of the major label acts are
moving to self-release,
or they're just not, you know, whether that's a choice or not. I think some people get kicked off the label, some people don't, some people choose to leave. But I'm just really happy that they've got like a big budget album. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like in that sense, from the promotion down to the recording. I think at the moment, like when you're looking at major label bands, it's things like the videos that take the hit, if you know what I mean. Like
100%.
When they've not got the budget, it's like they can't do that, they can't do this. So they have to bring things down.
And you're always hearing different stuff about music videos. Sometimes you hear that artists have to fund the video themselves. Sometimes you hear, like Miley Cyrus recently, like how much they get for a video, and then you watch the final product and you think, well, how much does that cost? And then there's famously that one, the Blink 182 video, where the full video is them getting their allowance for the video shoot, and they're like, right, how are we going to spend this on our video? But the video is them spending the budget.
Yeah.
So it's all like smoke and mirrors, and I suppose it very much depends on what label you're on and how much money is sort of circulating in that sort of label. And I suppose with your act, obviously somebody like Miley Cyrus is going to get a massive budget, but if you're maybe not performing that well, you might get a lot smaller of a budget, or be told, well, I definitely think this is like with fresh signings. They're like, right, well, you have to do all the work because you're not very big. And then you're like, well, if you don't give them anything, it's gonna be harder to get bigger.
Yeah. And like I said, just because you're making really good music doesn't mean you keep your contracts. I mean, for me, Fickle Friends have been very vocal about how they couldn't stay on Polydor after their album, but the album You Are Someone Else is a fantastic album.
Yeah, it's really.
I think it just flew under the radar, and it didn't get the promotion it needed. But like Fickle Friends, if you're asking me, like as an artist, they held up their end of the bag and they made a killer album. So how is that their fault? Do you know what I mean? It's just one of those things. But obviously, it's all about marketing and like trends and stuff. But that's why I'm glad, like, because Chromeo, right? When you think about Chromeo in like the music scene, where does Chromeo fit?
They're sort of occupying a bizarre place of being massive in certain circles and not unknown or obscure, but sort of like you said about Fickle Friends, under the radar in other sort of places. I'd be very interested to see how they're perceived in America, because in the UK they don't have like as much radio support, but I think a lot of people probably still know them from that
Come Alive.
Yeah, Come Alive, but also like they did that sync deal with the Robinsons.
Oh yeah.
What they're called? The juice, the squirting stuff.
Concentrate thing. I can't remember what the
I can't remember what the actual.
I remember the
song.
Called.
I remember the advert because of the song,
but I can't remember what it's called.
But that, it does a lot, because watching like the Zane Lowe thing, and they're talking about like the Killers, and we want to watch the Zane Lowe Chromeo thing, but that ain't out yet, as far as we've seen.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
Like the Killers was saying that they didn't want to put their song on the truck advert, the Ford advert, or whatever it was.
Yeah,
and it's one of those where it depends on the song and it depends on the advert. But I wouldn't say Come Alive is the Robinsons' fruit juice song advert song.
Juice though.
Yeah, I said Juice.
Oh no, wait.
Oh,
no,
Juice the song.
Yeah, Juice the song. Or was it Come Alive?
No, Come Alive was the because Juice wasn't out yet.
Oh,
it was Come Alive, because I think that had hit really hard in UK anyway.
Yeah.
And then that came out with like capitalising on it being like a hit, I think.
Yeah.
And also that's good because it can stick in your head if you hear it.
I think Jealous got a massive boom on UK radio as well. I remember hearing that track. But it's like, for me, like the deep cut shout outs go to like One Track Mind and stuff, don't they? They are just so good.
Bedroom Calling Part 1 is a masterpiece.
Yeah, that is like one of our go-tos, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like when you want to get inspired, you just put Bedroom Calling Part 1 on and you just listen.
Well, it can be, because, Chromeo sort of do this funky thing, but that song, it's so slow, but it just grooves so hard.
Yeah.
Bedroom Calling Part 1. And it has this 80s thing that, seems so familiar, but it's not something that you can actually pinpoint where they're drawing this song from and why it's, done in that manner. But it's just so good. I mean, I really like a slow jam.
Yeah, and like you said, the thing is with Bedroom Calling Part 1 is the lush sound design that carries through that full track. It just sounds so like omnipresent in like on speakers or in headphones. Like there's so little going on in the song, but it sounds so massive.
Yeah, because it has that room to breathe in that space. because the song's like really, really slow, it just allows, you know, because a lot of these synths, like the really nice synths, when you have hardware as well, you know, you're trying to put them into a mix at like 129 BPM, and you're having to scoop everything out and cut all the tails down, you know, like if you're programming them. Yeah. Because, you know, you can't just have like a 3-second release time, you know, in certain tempos, because it just becomes really, really muddy if you're playing a lot of notes, you know, unless you're doing like certain styles. Like I feel like synthwave's one of the only genres where you can have like a really, really long release time and sort of get away with it playing melodies.
Yeah.
But you couldn't do that like in a lot of other genres, because it just sort of, especially with these really big sounding synths, like the Junos and the Prophets and stuff like that, like when you have the stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Because then it takes up your full mix and you spend half the time trying to carve out the space for the song.
Yeah. Like Chromeo, I've got a Splice blog article up where they're talking about the studio, and just for like anybody who wants to know what sort of synths Chromeo's rocking, they've got like a sequential circuits Pro 1, a Korg MS-20, Korg Monopoly, a Moog Grandmother, a Mini Moog, Nord Modular, a Dave Smith's Prophet 5. You're like, these are all very eclectic synths. And I think what's cool with like synths, and like actually Giorgio Moroder said, I think just the other month or the other day on an interview, that all you need to make a good dance track is a 303 and an 808. And you're like, it's crazy because a lot of these synths are very old, but where has the music gone? Well, the synths, it's the same synths now that people are using.
I actually think, controversially, the synths have gone backwards. Like, you know, when you think 2010s and turnover of that decade, like 2009 going into 2010, it was all about Massive and Silence and these
newfangled VSTs that nobody had ever got
Nobody knew how to use them, and they were saying on Mix with the Masters about how nobody knew how to mix them either. People would be sending out their synth parts, and people just didn't know, like the engineers didn't know how to do it at first. And I think that, you know, because the full point that they say on the Mix with the Masters thing is that instead of processing each electronic instrument as you would an acoustic instrument, you know, you'd have your kick and you'd say, well, I need to treat this kick as a kick and this bass synth as a bass. But originally there was like, well, keyboards go in the keyboard bus and they're all keyboards, so we're going to process them like a keyboard. And I think surely that isn't a thing that they did.
But that is the reason a lot of those very early dance songs sound so thin.
They sound bizarre. Some of them,
any low end. Some of the early dance things that are mixed on major labels and stuff.
If you listen to some of the big hits from like 2008 to 2010, there's just this weird thing where there's no punch to the track. And you know, you compare it to things from like 2014, and it's like night and day. It's like they didn't even know what it was, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think, like, in regards to like the sort of zeitgeist of where we are with sort of music tech, we peaked really in the 2010s, probably the late 2010s.
Massive and that sort of era of VSTs. I suppose you could say like Machine. Yeah. Like Skrillex really used Machine to the point where that was as far as music could go to a lot of people.
Yeah,
and it's only gone backwards from
It's gone right back to analog equipment, and I mean, a big thing at the moment is just guitars and amps, like valve amps. Yeah, like when you think about what's being played on UK radio, most of it is very, very organic sounding. In terms of like the new stuff they're playing that isn't like either house or dance or whatever like that. Like a lot of it has this sort of just indie / just surf style guitaring.
And also on Chromeo's album, it's the first album they've had a live drummer for on some of the songs, isn't it?
Yeah, so, which I saw that announcement on Instagram, and that was very surprising because, number one, kudos to that drummer, because, I mean, I don't want to say he couldn't notice, because that sounds like a disservice to the drummer, but Chromeo's so tight, and it has that sort of like shuffle and that sequence swing on a lot of their songs.
Yeah.
To be a live drummer and fit into that, you've got to be incredible, right?
Yeah. You've got to, as they say, fit into the pocket. But yeah, it's very cool because it's not something you really think about. You know, like even somebody, it's even us who we always like pick apart songs and think, ooh, that it didn't even occur to me when I listened to the first playthrough of the album that it was a live drummer, because I just assumed it was a drum machine.
Well, because with drums, they can be done to every which way. I mean, I can't remember who said this, but there was something I think I saw on Threads where it was a drummer saying, you know, the way that technology is, a drummer is like, you can make a drummer in the box better than any drummer could possibly be, better than Neil Peart, because you can program everything. And if you can program accurately, you can recreate everything exactly how you want it, perfectly, either in quantized swing or just straight. But he was like, I choose to play drums, knowing that everybody can do this because I want to play drums. And I guess that's how you feel, you know?
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, right, is drums is a funny instrument. It's drums and vocals, I feel like, have had this issue a lot more than other instruments. It's very, very difficult to emulate saxophones and brass instruments. We've got, like, fake brass, but when it comes to the real thing,
yeah,
very, very difficult. And they have these massive Spitfire libraries just to try and do, or you like these guitar players from Native Instruments to try and do a power chord with some like mutes in, and it's very difficult, and then it's very unintuitive to program because you have to hold one note and it does like a 80s power chord riff, and it's like, well, what happens if I want to change the rhythm? Then it's a full nightmare. Whereas with drums and vocals, right, you have drums, which I think is, like you said, the easiest to replicate in like a digital manner. You just have all your separate drums with all its separate decays, and then you just thingy it and latch things, and you can program the velocity perfectly. Very easy to do. Vocals has the thing where you can manipulate vocals so easily. Because it's a mono, like nobody's singing in chords, obviously. It's mono, one note thing, right? And all you have to do is be able to pitch around and move it. And obviously vocal tools from autotune all the way through to like the modern Melodynes and vocal processors, even stuff like the VT3 by like hardware stuff by Roland. It's all about augmenting the way the voice sounds, and it's very easy to change that. And then you have like Vocaloids, which you don't even need a singer. If you're really good at programming a Vocaloid, you can just make it sound real-ish.
Especially if you're doing some of the electronic genres where the full point is that it's meant to sound robotic.
You know, this isn't even touching on like the "There I Ruined It" AI use, where they're just using AI to make Johnny Cash sing like Barbie Girl or whatever.
I find that genuinely like worrying, what he's doing on that.
Yeah, but obviously it's very rough around the edges, and it can trick you for a second, but then obviously you're listening to it on a phone speaker. You've no idea the quality, and also you've no idea how many times they're having to generate these things just to get the right phrasing or the right thing. Do you know what I mean?
When there was something about There I Ruined It, when I was debating it in Congress or something like that, and he was like, the videos don't just make themselves, because the full point was
they'll slave over trying to get that right and to get the cadence right and the voice formants.
I think
and stuff correct,
whoever it is who is There I Ruined It, they were saying about how much time and effort goes into just building one of these
50-second clips as well,
where they just have the Beach Boys singing like Jay-Z or something. And, it's not easy to do, even though, because you consume it in a very easy way, but it doesn't mean like to make that content is easy.
Now, here's the catch, should you say, with vocals and drums when it comes to programming. You can put a very easy vocal or drum beat into a DAW, but if you're starting to realistically replicate a drummer playing, you need to be able to be a drummer to think like a drummer, or at least listen to music to think like a musician who would play that.
And at a certain point, it's easier just to get a drummer.
And this is what I'm saying, like with vocals, like, yes, you don't need a good vocalist, but it's easier if you just have one.
Yes.
And this is the dilemma you have with programming versus just getting somebody in to do it. It doesn't matter how good you are. It's more time consuming to program Tom Sawyer by Rush than it is to get Neil Peart just to play it, because he'll just play it in like, 3 minutes.
Yeah, well, 5 minutes.
Well, 5 minutes, yeah, rush. But that's sort of what we're getting at with this, and this is why you're seeing a lot of still played music by people, not by drum machines. They said in the 60s that drum machines, or 70s, when the Lindrum first come out, that, oh no, drummers are not going to be able to be employed.
But I think that's why we're seeing a return to more organic music, because people are like, look, and I think record labels are like, look, you can tell it's a big artist because does this guy in his bedroom, does he have an entire valve amp rig and like a 3,000 quid Fender Telecaster? Does he have Capitol Studios, drum room and stuff? I know they make plugins.
Yeah.
But the point is, they're like, look, we can do this because we're on Capitol Records. You can't because you're independent. That seems to be where it's gone. Whereas, when in EDM, the sort of fantastic thing and also worst thing about that genre in a way is that it didn't matter whether you were sat on a major label or if you was literally on a cracked version with like headphones in your bedroom. Everybody really was on the same playing field.
Yeah, whereas like you say, if you can't use a talk box like P-Thug, you can't make Chromeo.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's just, and that's, I suppose, where we sort. I mean, is it tangentially we're still on track, but what's so good with a band like Chromeo is the personality. And that's what shines through in a lot of these acts, because you would say, well, Chromeo just play synths, but the personality that they have playing synths is almost stronger than some people playing rock on guitars.
Yeah.
It's so characterful in the way it sounds. It sounds so like real in so many ways. And that's sort of what we're saying with people like Chromeo is it's like you could not sequence Chromeo. Do you know what I mean? It just wouldn't be the same.
And they're veterans in the genre, and what are they doing? They're playing guitar and bass. And like I said, they've got a drummer on some of the tracks. It's one of those things. They use a lot of synths, but, the way they play bass, I mean, the bass is just funky, and that's how it's supposed to be. And I guess that's how we lead back to Chromeo, is just acknowledging how funky Chromeo is.
Yeah, with all those synths and moogs, it's still better just to play slap bass sometimes, and that's the choice of knowing which songs work with a slap bass, which songs work with like a moog sub fatty, for example.
Yeah.
And on that very like technical breakdown musicology approach, we'll say everybody listen to Adult Contemporary by Chromeo. It's a fantastic album and you will enjoy it. And thanks for listening, everybody.